Modern standard versus old school stopping power. And what I mean by that is taking something that is pretty much the most common concealed carry setup nowadays, comparing it to something that's old school that used to be used. So for our most common modern setup here, I'm using my Taurus G2C in 9mm, because the most common concealed carry option nowadays is a double stack 9mm pistol, anywhere from a 3" to a 3.5" barrel, using 9mm hollow point ammunition. And back in the day, that wasn't really an option. A lot of people used 38 Special. That was the most common, most effective cartridge, and they used lead round nose or wad cutters, or like I have here, semi-wad cutters, because it gave the penetration of a lead round nose, but the cutting power of a wad cutter. So I have our Remington UMC 115 grain jacketed hollow point, and our Remington Performance Wheel Gun 158 grain lead semi-wad cutter. So Taurus G2C with our 3.2" barrel, and my Taurus 605 with a 2" barrel. Actually, the amount of travel in those guns for the bullet nose to the muzzle is about the same with both of those. And it's actually a hair more with the 38 Special, because it's not a 357 in there. So we have very similar bullet travel in those guns, very similar weights here too. Both of these weigh about 20 ounces. So we're going to see what we get with these. So I'm going to go through the chronograph, see what kind of velocity and accuracy I get at the same time. Then I'm going to do my 10% clear ballistic test. I'm going to go into plain clear ballistics and do the best potential shot with both of those, which means just plain clear ballistics. I'm giving the best potential by not clogging the hollow point with denim if there's a hollow point, and seeing how that does. And after that, I'm going to do more of our real world simulation, where I have 4 layers of denim on the first 3" piece that represents our pectoral muscle. After that, I'll have a 1/4" medium density fiberboard to represent hidden ribs or sternum, and into more clear ballistics. We'll see how they compare in more of that real world simulation. And then I'm going to see how they are for shootability. So I'm going to shoot at my steel to see what kind of practical accuracy and shootability I can get with these. So let's get started with this test. All right, our 9mm is rated at 1145 feet per second. Our 38 Special is rated at 755 feet per second, but 115 grain versus 158 grain. The 38 Special is a little bit heavier, and that's what they went for way back in the day. So 9mm, 115 grain jacket at hollow point. These are rated at 1145 feet per second. Remington uses both 4" barrels for 38 and 9mm to get the rated velocity. So out of this 3.2" barrel, let's see how close I get to 1145 feet per second. 1098, 1119, 1131, 1086. Pulled that last one. 1092. I was doing so well for accuracy. Now our 38 Special, this is rated at 755 feet per second. Lead semi-wad cutter. Let's see how close we get to that 755 feet per second. 716, 751, 751, 749. I don't know if that was a read or not. I don't think it was. I think it was just a misread. But I'll take those 4 I got. And accuracy for me is a little bit harder to place them tight, but good velocity for what it is. So, a lot of times you only see plus P's getting into these energy numbers, so not bad for what it is. So let's hit our ballistics gel block and see how these compare. All right, plain clear ballistics, our best potential here. I started doing this because when I used to do nothing but the real world simulation, or just denim in general, people would look at other YouTubers and be like, why is your performance so bad? And I'll look at who they're referencing had good performance, and they were just using plain gel. So I like to include that just to show that, what I'm getting here is going to be the same as what other people get, but then show my more real world simulation and show how I think they would perform more realistically. So plain clear ballistics, 9mm. All right. Set that with our 38 Special. We'll take a look. All right, so we got a good amount of penetration going on with our 38 Special. A little more than I thought I was going to get. Now with our 9mm, obviously we have some very good energy dump in the first 3 inches here. We're not going to see anything like that with our 38. So our 38 on top, our 9mm here. So we definitely had expansion in that first 3 inches. So that's pretty good. We had decent energy dump with that, which we don't always see with 9mm. And we have really good damage going on right about here, potentially tumbling, but we're still cutting pretty well. We have a penetration of about 17¼ inches. That's not bad. Now 38 Special, we just went in straight line. That's what that semi-wide cutter nose does, is it provides for, you know, moving forward in a straight line, getting adequate penetration. We have penetration of just shy of 24 inches. So that's definitely a lot of penetration. I would not necessarily consider over penetration. You know, I think of over penetration when we start getting more than halfway through the second block, because that's where you get a potential of passing through an attacker. But around here, it's just a little bit much. But let's put on our denim, put on our MDF, see how they compare that way. Now here's more of our real world simulation. Denim sometimes will clog a hollow point, and that's not something this particular 38 Special has to worry about. And the MDF sometimes mangles that bullet. So we'll see what we get here through more of our real world simulation. 9mm, 4 layers of denim, 3 inches of clear ballistics, 1/4 inch MDF. Let's see what this does. Let me set that back up a little bit and then we'll hit with the 38. All right, 38 Special, 4 layers of denim, 1/4 inch MDF. Let's see what this does. We'll take a look. All right, so we can see that the MDF affected that 38 Special quite a bit more than it did the 9mm, because the 9mm performance is pretty similar. The type of damage I'm seeing with both of these is indicating tumbling. That first shot with the 9mm, you see like kind of just like lines going in the gel. That indicates cutting, but when we see the bubbles, that's more indicating that bullet's tumbling and rolling around. And we see that with both of these. So when we look at our MDF here, and what we're going to see here is we did have some expansion with that 9mm even after going through that denim. So that's very impressive, because a lot of 9mm, even high-end plus Ps of better design, sometimes won't do that. So that's good on this Remington that it's doing well. With our 38 Special, obviously we're just going to go straight through a perfect hole. Not any difference there. In the first 3 inches, it looks pretty much the same. Our 9mm had slightly less energy dump than it did in plain gel, but only slightly less. And of course our 38 Special looks the same. So with our 9mm went in here, and it looks like it expanded, but it looks like it's probably starting to roll around in here. And what we got for penetration is just a little bit more than before, but perfectly acceptable. 17¾ inches penetration. That's perfectly within those FBI standards of not getting too much penetration. 12 to 18 inches. Now clear ballistics is a little bit less dense, so I would consider clear ballistics 14 to 20 inches more ideal, but regardless, that's perfect. Now with our 38 Special, we come to about the 8-inch mark, start tumbling around a little bit, which is not necessarily a bad thing. It did happen to orient straight, but what we have in more of this real world simulation is about 15.5 inches of penetration. So when we look at this, you know, sometimes we look at stuff that people do in plain gel, these tests, and they'll take some old school thing and they'll be like, look how much it failed. But they're not really realizing that some of those old school designs were designed from people that were like shooting animals and whatnot, and they're like, this is doing pretty well. So when you look at something like the semi-wide cutter, that was designed to perform well in the real world, as were some 9mm were designed to perform well in gel. Not all of them, but these both did pretty well in more of our real world simulation. So I don't really have an issue with either of these. I think they did pretty well. Obviously our 9mm had more damage in there. So I would say as far as terminal ballistics, our 9mm does look a little bit better. But I can't really say that in the real world, if somebody was hit with this 9mm, that it would just drop them and the 38 Special wouldn't do much. I think the differences are a little bit closer than a lot of people think they are. So let's take a close-up look at these, and then I'm going to shoot my steel to see what kind of practical shootability I can get. All right, so here's a close-up look at these bullets. And these are the plain gel shots here, and we have really good expansion with our 9mm, as to be expected. It's very rare that a 9mm won't expand in plain gel. So we got decent expansion. It's not huge, but it does the job. And when we look at our 38 Special, there's almost no change to that projectile other than the rifling gripping into it. Now when we look through our medium density fiberboard, this is pretty typical what we see with most good cartridges, or at least decent cartridges with hollow point bullets, is they get a little bit smaller after hitting that medium density fiberboard. And that's one of the most important things in ballistic testing I think people don't take into consideration. They say, well, the density of bone and how far it will penetrate is already factored into ballistics gel, but they don't take into the fact that when you hit a rib, it's going to make that bullet a lot smaller around, and that's going to allow for it to penetrate more. So looking at our 9mm through our MDFs, it still looks good though. It still looks really good. So we had good performance with that. Now our 38 Special here, you know, we can see imprints of the denim actually in the front of that bullet because it's soft lead. It's very much mangled, much more of a round nose. That makes sense why it might tumble more if it's, you know, becoming a little more round. The overall length of the bullet is shrunk down just a hair. But, you know, hitting that rib simulation really changed that bullet, which is going to change how far it penetrates. And when you're looking at energy numbers getting down lower and lower and lower, you know, the MDF affects it more. That's why it's hard for me to come up with a standard number of, you know, how many inches does the MDF take away in penetration. That's so much different between different factors. And you talk about like a hard cast or a solid copper bullet, the answer would be none. If we're talking about a soft lead bullet moving very slow or that has very little energy, let's say a 22 long rifle lead bullet, you're talking maybe 6 inches. It might limit the penetration. And stuff like this, it's more like 1 to 2. So looking at these though, you know, we got okay performance with all of them, to be honest. With the 9mm, you know, performing a little bit better because it did expand a hollow point, but not bad performance with our 38 Special. So that's a close-up look at those. All right, 12 yards from the target, I'm just going to get a sight picture and pull off 5 shots of each of these to see how they feel for me for shootability. So here's our 9mm. All right, that shot pretty good. Was just letting my muscle memory come back down, and you know, that's easy to do with the 9mm, and that looks like it'd be pretty effective. 38 Special, let's see what I can do with this. All right, one was a little bit high into the left. That was just randomly stuff that happens when I'm shooting quicker. Both seem about even, to be honest, for shootability. The recoil feels the same as far as poundage. The only difference I feel is slightly more muzzle rise with the 38 Special because it's a heavier bullet. But as far as the actual poundage in the hand, and both these weigh about roughly 20 ounces, about the same between both of these. So let me back it up just a little bit. All right, 25 yards from the target. Let me fire a few shots and see what this looks like. 9mm. Those continue to stay pretty accurate for me. 38 Special. All right, I'm pulling those a little bit high left at that distance. So let me back up to 40 yards. I like that distance. That's about the max distance that's really practical in my opinion. So let me do that. All right, 40 yards from the target. I've explained this before. I like this distance because it gives me pretty much a challenge, but it's close enough that I can usually hit the target most of the time. And I always mention the Dickens situation almost 2 years ago. Eli Dickens stopped the threat from 40 yards. And a lot of people, not a lot of people, but a couple people have come on and gotten really angry that I didn't share exactly how it happened, how he fired some from 40 and he moved up and fired others, as if I'm supposed to be running back and forth when I shoot from 40 yards so that it's more accurate with Eli Dickens' situation, which I don't understand that. But 40 yards is, you know, about the furthest practical distance I like to use because of that, because you can kind of relate it to a real world situation. Plus, just the way I feel about it, like I feel like it's practical where I think I could probably hit a target at that distance, but going back a little bit further, it starts to get questionable. It just depends on the firearm, but with most firearms, I feel like 40 yards is your max practical distance. So 40 yards from the target. I'm gonna see what I can do here with our 9mm. See if I can make any hits. So those groups open up quite a bit for me at that distance. This particular pistol, you know, I'm not as good with it as I am others. Now with this, I'm guessing this is gonna jolt up high because being such a slow velocity, a lot of times you get a little recoil before that bullet leaves the muzzle and it'll shoot it up. And it'll continue to rise up for, you know, a good amount of distance. So I'm gonna have to aim basically at the base of that target and see if I can make any hits. All right, it didn't arc up as much as I thought it was going to, and I did pull one. So now that we're done with everything practical, I'm gonna back it up to 75 yards. I think it's fun. Just goof off, you know, shoot and see if I get a hit at 75 yards. That's basically why I do that. I'm not saying that you should train to shoot an attacker at 75 yards with a handgun. So let me back it up. All right, 75 yards from the target just for fun. Historically, I've never been very good with this particular G2C pistol. I've always had trouble at more distance. And 38 Special, that gun is pretty accurate, but with loads like this, I never know where they're going to hit. So this is a huge challenge for me. As where if I was using my 4-inch revolver or 5-inch semi-auto, that wouldn't be a huge challenge at all. So I don't know what to expect. So 9mm, see if I can make any hits at 75 yards. Above the target a little bit. Really low camera protector plate. There's a reason why I put that there. Try for some more. All right, so with that, I wasn't able to dial in anything consistent. It's like some of them went high, some of them went really low. And I started aiming center, and then some of them went high, some of them went low. So at least for me, it's just kind of scattering at that distance. So 38 Special, I don't know about this. I'm just gonna aim center, see where they hit. Ooh, must have grazed that last one. So actually a little more accurate with this than what I thought it was going to be. So making a shot with a snub. I don't know why people say it's so hard to make a shot with a snub at distance, and they mention sight radius. At least for me, I think it might have to do with the fact that I have pretty long arms. When I push the gun out, the sight radius to me seems the same on a 2-inch or a 4-inch or a 6-inch Revolver. That's just to me, but for some people, I guess it's an issue. So what I'm seeing with this ammunition is very surprising. You know, you see that first impact in the plane, clear ballistics, and you're like, man, that 38 special really over-penetrated, didn't do much damage, and that 9mm is 10 times better. And then when you see it in the more real-world simulation, that 9mm actually did a lot better than most 9mm. But even with that being the case, the 38 special, as far as penetration goes, you know, it seems like a pretty good comparison. And you know, when we go through that rib simulation, it kind of smushes that nose just a little bit on that 38 special, which will kind of cause more damage, and it can either make it larger or make it tumble more, and we saw that. So I think overall these are a lot more comparable than what people make them out to be. A lot of people make the 38 special out to be this useless cartridge, and the 9mm is as good as 357 Magnum or something like that. They come up with these crazy ideas, but honestly, looking at these for myself, I think both are pretty good choice. Now, statistically speaking, as far as percentages probably of expansion, which I haven't measured them yet, but you know, our 9mm checks off more of those boxes of what the FBI says that you need for good personal defense. I don't take that with anything other than a grain of salt. But a 38 special, you pretty much will fail all those. But I think overall, the real world numbers would suggest these are a lot closer than what people make it out to be. So that's what you get today. I guess you'll have to draw your own conclusions, because I'm basing a lot of what I'm doing on experience and opinion, and not actual perfect statistics. I haven't looked up either of these exactly on a stopping power chart or anything, but just judging from this, I think they're a little bit closer. 9mm a little bit higher up there probably on stopping power, but not by a lot. Probably less than 10% difference in the real world. So that's what you get today. So as always, comment, share, and like, and thanks for watching.